Good morning, everybody. Today is January 2nd. Hope everybody had a good and safe New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. So, today we are continuing our journey into insanity, which is exactly what the study of Oswald is. It's the study of insanity. So, once again, I'm disappointed by the fact that people who come forward with information allegedly having solid information on Oswald and the Marines are full of shit. They're completely full of shit, and it's very frustrating for me. Who is most full of shit lately? Well, last night I was up till about 4 o'clock in the fucking morning researching and studying the words of Richard Sear, CYR. Hell, now that I think about it, let me see if I can't bring up some of Richard Sear's statements. And the reason I'm so frustrated with Richard Sear is because he seems to be a fucking liar. Okay, all these people who come forth with information saying, hey, I knew Oswald and we didn't go, like Alexander Feld or Alan Feld or whatever the fuck Feld's real name is, which can't be corroborated. Alan Feld comes forward, says that he knew Oswald and they went to Memphis together. Years later, Armstrong tracks the guy down. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I never said anything like that. Changed his social security number but didn't move, which is rather weird, right? If you're going to change your social security number, try to get a new identity, you should probably fucking move. But he didn't. So that's very strange. So Richard Sear says that he was on a boat with Oswald and that he was his immediate supervisor in guard duty on this boat. Yet, and he names the boat, and we'll get to that. And he says, but they were on maneuvers in the South China Sea to the Philippines. But he's wrong. I don't want to say he's a liar, but Richard Sear, CYR, is full of shit because he names the boat that they were on together, and he said it was the LST Cayuga County. They named a bunch of boats after counties for some fucking reason, but probably because of donations or some shit like that. But the reality is, it is USS Cayuga County, and it's LST-529. Well, thank God, if you go to the catalog.archives.gov/search, you can search the National Archives. And guess what I did last night till 4 in the fucking morning? I pulled every fucking record of the USS Cayuga County I could find. And at first it was promising. It was like, yeah, this is going to be it. This is going to be the boat that Harvey Oswald took to Corregidor in the Philippines. And it totally wasn't. Richard Sear said that he was on maneuvers with Oswald. And that's totally false because the boat, the Cayuga County, USS Cayuga County, LST-529, I pulled all the fucking records. That boat was in San Diego, and then it was in San Francisco, and then it made its way to Yokosuka. And at this point, I'm getting a boner at this point. I'm like, yes, it's here at Yokosuka. It's going to be perfect. I'm going to pull these daily diaries from this boat, the ship logs, and I'm going to know exactly how Harvey Oswald pulled off his great impersonation of Oswald in the South China Sea. But no. The USS Cayuga County, it was at Yokosuka until approximately December the 3rd or 4th. Kind of hard to interpret how they lay out, where we're at, where we're from, where we're going in a series of pages. But it's around the 3rd or the 4th of December. And at this point, I'm just freaking out. I'm like, yes. I'm like, here's the proof that Oswald was on a boat that didn't leave on the 20th, like he's supposed to have left on the 20th, on the USS Terrell County. Which isn't in any of the official fucking records. Why is that not in any of the official records? the USS Terrell County. I had to find it in a statement that was made by somebody in a random FBI file. But you would think that would be all over the fucking story, right? You've got him on the Bexar going to Japan, and you've got him on whatever the name of the boat is he took back, right? That's very, very well known. But why is it that they've never actually publicized the name of the boat that he allegedly took to the Philippines, and we know he took the Skagit to Taiwan. We know that for a fact. But they never publish really and promote the notion that he was on the USS Terrell County, which is what the official story really is. The official story, when you look at Terrell County, that's what it is. But it's not in the official story. They don't promote it. They don't tell you that. You have to go digging to figure out what fucking boat it was on, and it took me months to figure it out. Two things. Number one, I went through all the goddamn USS Terrell County diaries, and guess what's missing? Guess what months are missing from the USS Terrell County logs? Oh, well, let's see. November 1957, December 1957, January 1958, February 1958, March 1958, April 1958, and then everything picks up as normal. Just so happens to be the months that allegedly Oswald was on that boat to be transported to Corregidor in the Philippines, and Subic Point. Fucking weird, huh? The National Archives catalog is missing the months of the USS Terrell County, which is the boat that Oswald, the official, the implied official story, I'll call it, says that he was on. Okay, so where the fuck are those records, huh? Where are those records? Why are they missing? I don't know why the fuck they're missing, but they're missing. They're not there. You can double check my work at catalog.archives.gov/search. So, but even more disappointing than that is the fact that the USS Cuyahoga County, as we were told by Richard Cyr, C-Y-R, I keep spelling that because it's a fucking weird spelling. Richard Cyr says that he was on this boat, the Cuyahoga County, with Oswald, and they went down to basically Okinawa. It was IE, the island was called IE something, I don't remember, some Japanese name. But it was right next to Okinawa. So especially when I saw that, I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be Oswald going to Okinawa. And well, no. They made a pit stop at this little island just off the coast of Okinawa, and then they went back to Guam. Right? So the fucking Cuyahoga County, as stated by Richard Cyr, is a dead end. Okay? Anybody wants to go dig up the records on the Cuyahoga County and double check this. There are no, those records that were pointed out by Richard Cyr that should exist don't exist. And I went months ahead. Richard Cyr went back to the States in February of 1958. And he said that Oswald was still out there when he left in February of 58. So he wouldn't have any knowledge of anything that happened after February of 58. But I went all the way up to like May, June, July of 58. And that fucking boat was in Guam. The USS Cuyahoga County, as Richard Cyr told us, was the boat he knew Oswald on, was false. Okay, another dead end. Just like Alan R. Feld or Alexander Feld. And just like another one I got that I have a fucking strange suspicion is going to be totally bunked too. Donald Goodwin. Okay, Donald Goodwin. And I'll read Donald Lloyd Goodwin. I'll read his statement here. Photographer at Elgin Davis Studios in South Vermont, Los Angeles. Goodwin stated he served in the United States Marine Corps from 53 to June of 59. His serial number was 1448272. He received an honorable discharge from the United States Marine Corps in June of 59 at Camp Pendleton. After completing 6 years of service enlistment, Goodwin stated that he recalls that in late 56 or early 57, he was returned to the United States from overseas assignment. Was sent to Camp Pendleton. At this time, he was a communications specialist, and he had the rating of sergeant. He was assigned to a communications group in the 5th Marine Division, made up of about 20 men. He recalls that one of the Marines in this group was Private First Class Oswald. He recalls that Oswald was a radio communicator, but could not remember whether Oswald was a CW operator or a voice communicator. Goodwin remained with this group for about 90 days, and he was transferred to a photographic unit. Therefore, his recollection of Oswald is very vague. During the publicity following the assassination of President Kennedy, he realized that Lee Harvey Oswald was the same person as the Oswald in his group at Camp Pendleton. Okay, this is going to be blatantly false also. This is going to end up being completely false because we're talking late 56 or early 57. Well, Oswald didn't even get a promotion until May 2nd, 57, when he got promoted to private first class. Got promoted at Biloxi a day before he left. He got promoted at Jacksonville a day before he left to go to Biloxi. Okay. So Donald Goodwin, I'm sure he has good intentions and all, but the person that he's talking about, we have a couple indicators here. Number one, he says private first class Oswald. He doesn't mention any first names when it comes to his recollection. Then he says that his recollection is very vague. Okay, so take those two things into consideration. And when you take those two things into consideration, you have to come to realize that the Oswald who Goodwin was talking about here is not Lee Harvey Oswald. I kind of entertained for a moment that it could have been Robert Oswald, because Robert Oswald keeps making the little hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Robert Oswald, I'm convinced at some point in time was involved in some of the Lee Oswald impersonations. Not the ones that I focus on in the book with Seymour and Thornley, but one of the miscellaneous ones, like, what was it, Bilbo Trucking? Bilbo Trucking? Really? So this woman and her husband... this woman said her husband worked with Lee Harvey Oswald in 55 or 56 at Bilbo Trucking, and that he would come in and get a paycheck, but they never really saw him work. He would just come and get a paycheck. That I kind of believe is Robert Oswald, okay? Because it's not fucking Lee Harvey Oswald, because Lee Harvey Oswald at that point in time wasn't even in the fucking Marines yet, right? So he couldn't have been out of the Marines. So it had to have been Robert Oswald, because, well, it didn't have to be, but my suspicion is it's Robert Oswald, because the other Oswald's still like a high school kid, 16 years old, pipsqueak, not going to be getting a job for a trucking company, okay? So when I come across things like that, it screams to me of Robert Oswald. But that's not the case here, and unfortunately, I don't know if this is intentional or if this is just how it happened to work out, but when you look at how many Oswalds were in the Marine Corps in 1956, 1957, 1958, who started at Camp Pendleton and then went to Jacksonville to go to the basic aviation training and then went to Biloxi, and then from there either went back to El Toro or went to Memphis or Middleton, Tennessee, I believe it's called. And so when I looked at all these factors here, I found no less than 3 additional Oswalds at the virtually exact same time, give or take a couple weeks or a month or two, doing the same circuit. And I'm talking about Clyde Oswald, Clayton Oswald, and Clifford Oswald. 2 of them are brothers. One of them is not. It's kind of weird, huh? But these fucking guys, go Google these guys. Go look at their obituaries. Go look at their find a graves. Clifford, Clayton, I can't even remember. I just said it, and I can't even remember the third one. Those Oswalds there, when you go and look up their histories, they got real histories. And guess what? These fucking guys were all in the Marines in 56, 57, 58. All of them were at Camp Pendleton. All of them were at Jacksonville. All of them were at Biloxi. And then some of them, Clayton Oswald went to fucking, went to Memphis to be an airplane mechanic, right? So I believe his brother also did. I believe, was it Clayton and Clifford are brothers? Well, 2 of the brothers basically were in the exact same place, the exact same time. I think offset by a couple weeks because I don't know if they didn't want to have them in the same group or what, but these guys were all in the aviation stuff and they were all into the radar ground operator course, and they all took the same courses, perhaps at different times. So when I come across people like Donald Goodwin, and I can tell you that Clayton Oswald was in at least 6 months before Lee Harvey Oswald. So when I see things like this from Donald Lloyd Goodwin, who says that Oswald was with him, but then he says his recollection is very vague. I'm like, look, this might have been Oswald, but it probably was not Lee Harvey Oswald. This was probably Clayton Oswald or Clifford Oswald or Clyde Oswald, right? One of those 3 guys. Because those 3 guys, like I just said, were all in the aviation stuff, all in the same places, and all being rotated around. The only thing about the other, Clayton and Clifford, I don't think they ever... those guys never were stationed in Atsugi or out of the country. Those guys got to stay in America the whole time. So yeah, disappointing. I'm digging, I'm doing a micro detail analysis of all this data here, and all these people coming forward saying they knew Oswald in other places, it's just falling apart. I can't even though we have the statements of Owen Dejanovic, who said that he was with Oswald in Biloxi at a course that was a week behind our Oswald, the real Oswald's Biloxi course. Even though he says that, and there's some couple of paperwork anomalies that would indicate that, I got nothing else. I got no evidence. There's just a big black fucking hole here. And other weird things are popping up. When I look into the shooting incident where Oswald allegedly shot himself in the fucking arm, Jesus Christ, we have 10 different accounts on how that happened. Allegedly, every account is basically the same in as far as this goes. Oswald was alone in the room where the bunks were, and the shot goes off. That's the same uniform story in everybody's tale, okay? Oswald was in the room, and I got like 5 people who claim to be the first person in the fucking room, okay? So all these stories that they vary. Like the shot went off, and like all of a sudden this person ran in the room, and they were the first person there, and they said, Oswald, what happened? And everyone says the same thing. Oswald said, I think I shot myself, like Forrest Gump. So really weird. Really weird. We have different people. Allegedly, there was no one around except for one guy, right? But there was nobody in the room. But then one of the statements says that somebody was in the room and they almost got shot and the bullet missed their head. Well, if the bullet missed their head, how did it get lodged in Oswald's fucking arm, right? Like, what is going on here? I'm not even going to go into how some people said he got shot in the wrist. Some people said he got shot in the leg. Some people said he got shot in the elbow. Right? It's this all, I swear to God, I am almost starting to believe that everything about Lee Harvey Oswald is a pure fiction. Like, did this guy even exist? Are we sure we didn't have CGI back in the fucking 60s? Like, the entire story of Oswald and his mother and the family and all, it's just little holes keep popping up in it. Like, here's another example. When Marguerite Oswald was trying to get the kids into the fucking orphanage. Well, she did get them into the orphanage when she disappeared up to New York and New Jersey in 41 to 44. But she is such a disgusting, rotten, fucking cunt human being. Like, I hope she's rotting in fucking hell right now. She attempted to give her kids up permanently to the orphanage. All 3 of them. She tried to give all 3 of them permanently to the orphanage. She even used the word permanent in her letter. And they're like, fuck you. They're like, you got 2 parents. You just got married. You got a man supporting you. She's like, no way. No way are we going to take your kids. So, but on one of those, we have a bunch of papers and letters back and forth and communications. And on one of the applications, she signed a wrong name. She did it not once, she did it twice. She did it twice for Robert and for her when she put the last name Oswald. So when you go through John Armstrong's documents, you come across some weird stuff. You come across a half a dozen Oswalds who are not in this Oswald family. You come across Margaret Mary Oswald, who was born in Philadelphia, raised in, there's 2 different Margaret Mary Oswalds. One of them was born in Manchester, Connecticut. The other one was born in Philadelphia. Both of them end up in working for the Navy in the 1940s. They're all throughout John Armstrong's documents. Then you come across another Oswald, but it's an Oswald with a T, not a D. Oswald. And you're like, why the fuck is John Armstrong bringing up these weird fucking variations of the Oswald name, right? He's got to be crazy. There's nothing going on here. Well, then as you're going through these documents, and like I just said, with the Bethlehem orphanage, Marguerite Oswald signed some fucking documents. She's filling out the information, and she put Robert and Marguerite Oswald with a T. And then in both instances, she drew over it. You could tell she wrote over it and made it into a D, a more pronounced D. Like, what the fuck is that about? What the fuck is that about? Why the fuck is allegedly Marguerite Oswald, when she's trying to give her kids over to the fucking orphanage, why is she signing, not once, but twice? Why is she signing the wrong name, Oswald, and not Oswald? Not only that, all of you have heard me discuss how many times we have Lee Harvey Oswald's birth date is indicated as the 19th, right? Meaning his real birth date is October 18th, 1939, but we have a lot of entries where Marguerite Oswald herself, or even Robert Oswald on the death certificate, puts October the 19th. It's one day off. John Pick is a victim of this as well, I discovered, in going through the documents. I forget what month. It might have been January, but the month is irrelevant. But what I've noticed is that John Pick, on the Bethlehem orphanage stuff, Marguerite has his birthday off by a day. Instead of the 17th, it was the 18th. That's what she had for John Pick. Now, what the fuck is going on here? What is going on here? What is the purpose of having your kid's birth date off by a day? She's not smart enough to think ahead to obscure future records. She's just not. So what is going on here? She is not smart enough to think ahead in any way, shape, or form. She could not see past the nose on her face. All she cared about was money and where her next meal was coming from. She didn't have the ability to think big picture, long term. In 20 years, people are going to be looking up my sons and I have to throw them off the curve. No, that's ridiculous. So what exactly is happening here? Why is it that both John Pick and Lee Harvey Oswald have Marguerite Oswald playing the birthday game? The off by a day game is what I'll call it. I haven't looked into Robert Oswald to see if any of his birth dates are off. But I'm sure they are. I'm sure. Remember, these guys' tax returns are all classified top secret. Never going to see them. The reason we're never going to see them is it's going to show. I promise you it's going to show, number one, that there were multiple Lee Harvey Oswalds in different cities at the same time. That's number one. Number two, it's going to show, the reason Robert Oswalds are hidden is because it's going to show that some of the jobs Lee Harvey Oswald are attributed to having, Robert Oswald actually had. I promise you that much. But what's the purpose of all this? Remember, this has nothing to do with the assassination. This is get a spy into the Soviet Union Cold War bullshit. But what's that got to do with John Pick and changing his birth date? What's that got to do with Robert Oswald impersonating his brother Lee? And going through the documents, it makes it really hard to determine who's who, despite the fact you'll have some seemingly contradictory old documents. So I really don't know what to tell you in as far as what these anomalies really mean. They don't really have anything to do with Kennedy. That's obvious. But why would they be going to such lengths to have people like Robert Oswald get involved? You know, and this brings me back to 126 Exchange Place and the seemingly 4 or 5 month gap of residences that I have for Marguerite and Lee Oswald, and how when discussing this time period, Lillian Moret and Robert Oswald both, they can't seem to keep their years straight. Oh, I don't know if it was 54, if it was 55 or 56. Oh, it was 54, but Lee was in the Civil Air Patrol, which was totally fucking false, right? So we've got like these people pretending they don't know what's what. Why? All just a cover for the fact that there were 2 Oswalds? Maybe. But, oh, and I did find another gap in Marguerite Oswald's residential history. I found, I think, another 3-month gap surrounding the time that she was at Victor Street. I spent a lot of time yesterday going over that era of Victor Street and when Marguerite Oswald would have possibly come back from New York. And the earliest I get, I'm seeing references to February of 1954. I'm sorry, not back from New York, back from Boston. Because remember, Robert Oswald, I found two references to it, one in his book and one in his testimony, where he says that they were driven, him and John Pick were driven to the Chamberlain Hunt Academy in Mississippi. And from there, Lee and Ekdahl and Marguerite drove in her 30-something Buick. They drove up to Boston. And as per the testimony and the timing and when they started school, I have determined this was in September of 1945. September 45. Here's the weird thing. So they get together, basically. I'm putting it forth that they got together in New York in 1942. They don't even end up getting married until May of 1945. And he does not live with Marguerite this whole time. So they get married May of 1945. Immediately, what happens is the house at Victor Street is put up for sale, and it's sold in June of 1945. Despite the fact that it's sold in June of 45, it appears as though they continued to live there until September. That must have been part of the arrangements, because we still have post-dated letters from August to Victor Street and July from Victor Street, even though the sale of the house was in June. So that must have been in the contract that they could stay there for a couple more months, because there's no evidence of them living anywhere else at that time period at all. September comes around, and they obviously move out of Victor Street. And this is where we seem to have some address problems in regards to Boston and in regards to Lee Oswald. And this is another anomaly that I found that predates the San Saba address in 47. It predates everything. This might be the first anomaly that we have. It is universally agreed upon, well, to people who know this, that Oswald did go to Boston with Ekdahl and Marguerite. And Robert attested to this. And I believe so did John Pick. It isn't controversial at all. They both knew that Lee was going to Boston. He wasn't at the Bethlehem Children's Orphanage. So they're gone from September through, at the absolute latest, February 20th to 22nd. So that's about 5 months, 6 months, right? That's approximately what Robert said, right? So that makes a lot of sense that they were up there that long. And we know that they were back in February of 46. I believe a couple things happened. We know also that in earlier in 46, we had Oswald had his mastoidectomy. So there are indicators that they had to have been back from New York. It seems that they came back from New York, it seems that Marguerite Oswald came back from New York in 44, took the kids out of the orphanage, bought the Victor house. For some reason, she's not married to Ekdahl yet, but Ekdahl comes and he lives in Fort Worth, and she lives in Dallas at Victor Street, which is weird. I don't know why. I know that the Ibasco had a plant there that he was allegedly working out of. But again, he was allegedly traveling also. And then allegedly he's from Boston, but when you look up his census records, he's always in fucking New York, right? So I don't know what the fuck they're talking. Like, everything that we're told about everything is just wrong. But Ekdahl is living in Fort Worth. He doesn't move into the house until they get married in May, but then they sell the house in June. In September, they take the kids and drop them off at the fucking Chamberlain Hunt, and those guys are basically there for the next 3 years, Robert and John Pick, with the occasional, visiting and coming back for holidays and that kind of thing. But they're there for basically 3 years. The big problem is that this is in September, and we have them not coming back until basically, let's just even give them the benefit of the doubt and say January or February of 1946. The biggest problem is that we have Lee Harvey Oswald allegedly enrolled and nobody can really figure out if it's a kindergarten or first grade because there's some contradictory information here. But Oswald allegedly attends a Benbrook Common School that year, starting in October. He's registered and starts after the school semester had already begun. Why he's late, I don't know. But it's in October that he's at the Benbrook Common School. Well, this totally contradicts the notion that he was in Boston until February, because he had a good attendance record. I believe he was present for 67 and a half days, and he was absent for like 8 or 10 days. I mean, it's normal, right? Normal stuff. So how the fuck is Lee Harvey Oswald up in Boston, and he's simultaneously at the Benbrook School? This was caught by, God, who was it? It might have been the Warren Commission. Yeah, it had to have been, because it was Liebler talking about it. But there was one notation in a chronology, or was it John Eli Hart? It might have been John Eli Hart. So John Eli Hart was one of the investigators for the Warren Commission, and I believe he, in his chronology that he put together, which is a pretty detailed chronology, I mean, it's really good, and it's somewhat accurate. I was really shocked. He basically determined in his notes that there's no way Oswald could have attended Benbrook Common School in the fall of 1955 to early 1956 for the first grade year. Not possible. That was what his determination was. He said we have to eliminate the idea that Oswald attended Benbrook Common School in 1945. So what are we left to think here? What are we left to believe at this point? I don't know. To me, how I interpret this is probably the first anomaly that we have in regards to conflicting schools and conflicting addresses. Okay. So if I'm not mistaken, and I haven't gotten this far yet, I believe that there's some indication that Marguerite Oswald, when she was allegedly up in Boston, was working down there in Fort Worth. So I definitely have to spend some more time on that. It's kind of funny because once you come to understand like the various phases of the assassination and the various points that you have to look at, it almost becomes like a series of threads, like literal threads. And so you kind of know how to go about the research process by your identification of these threads and how these threads are operating. Like I've been on this stuff for years, right? And I've been only on this aspect for, a couple months, 3 or 4 months. But I'm starting to see the patterns of these threads take shape. And it's making my processing of information a lot easier, which is really good. But yeah, so we're talking Anomaly City. Anomaly City here. Well, I can't believe I've actually been talking for 33 fucking minutes. So I'm going to put off A Mother in History. And allow me to take some time and, let me see, discuss Oswald again in the Marines in 1957, 1958, because I think I'm really starting to put together the pieces on not how they coordinated, but the fact that there was coordination between the Oswalds. So what it appears happened and this kind of was brought to my attention by studying the Cuyahoga County, USS Cuyahoga County. And so I'm back to the USS Henrico. And there's another ship, the USS Current. These two ships, the Henrico and the Current, and a number of other ships arrived in Yokosuka between the 12th and the 16th or the 20th of, what fucking month was that? That was November of 1957, okay? So what happened is Lee Oswald, shoots himself with the gun. Oh, and I found a statement from another Marine that Lee Oswald told him that it was on purpose. So I'm going to dig that up at some point. I got 600 new screenshots that I have to sort for my slideshow. So that's kind of where my mind is with all this stuff. But the two boats that I think are most likely the ones, or I thought were most likely the ones that Oswald could have been on, were the Cuyahoga County, no thanks to Richard Sear, or the USS Henrico, but I also discovered the USS Current. And the USS Current, and what this brought me to understand is that there were a whole bunch of military operations going on there, like testing. They were doing drilling and like some really in-depth stuff. And so you had a whole bunch of boats meet there and then depart between the 16th and the 20th. Now, that aside, not all of those boats were participating full-time in these exercises. Some of them actually had places to go and things to do. Like the USS Terrell County, which I obviously am never going to find the fucking logs for because they've destroyed them. But in digging into like the logs of the Terrell County, you'll find, this is an assumption here, but it's going to be a correct assumption, that they spent a couple days doing this drilling and then they went to their actual, station where they were going to be set up, which was Subic Point for our Oswald, for Lee Oswald. The problem that we have been repeatedly running into are the two photographs from Corregidor, right? The one photograph marked 1957 by Oswald, when we know that Lee Oswald wasn't there till 1958. I'm not going to say that Oswald was stupid and just put the wrong year, like some people actually have done that and said that. He was just stupid and he put the wrong year. No, you fucking retard. He put 1957 because it was 1957. And you have the photograph with Bruce Wayne. Not Bruce Wayne. The fuck? What the fuck? Bruce Wayne. That's Batman. John Wayne. You have the photograph with John Wayne, where Oswald's in the background on mess duty. So once again, we have evidence of him being on mess duty. We have evidence of him in the background of the John Wayne photograph. And that John Wayne photograph is alleged to have been taken in January of 58. So we have some major conflicting information here because at the time of that, you either have the other Oswald on his way to Corregidor, at Corregidor, or about to be swapped at Corregidor with Harvey Oswald, who was obviously in the photograph with John Wayne. So we have some logistic issues here that I'm still trying to work out. But yes, so there was confusion. I think there is confusion, intentional confusion, over Oswald and what boat he was on, because Lee Oswald did what he could to be delayed in his activities. I was mistaken in believing he did it to avoid Harvey Oswald, because it seems as though all these boats were launched to participate in Operations Marlift and Fiblink and what's the other one? There's a couple other ones here. So there was, in all, there was about 8 to 12 ships involved in these various operations that were mainly testing operations. And clearly, the two Oswalds had to be coordinated to not end up in the same place at the same time, right? And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I believe Martin Strand got caught in the middle of this. And I believe Martin Strand freaked out and called his fucking brother. So what would that indicate? That would indicate that the killing of Strand wasn't in a spur of the moment, heat of the moment kind of thing, because he couldn't have gotten shot and then called his brother, right? So obviously, this is a big if, we're going on speculation here, so just play along with me. If Martin Strand found out about this dual Oswald stuff, called his brother, and his brother's like, what the fuck? That would have been part of the reason that he was killed, right? It wouldn't have been like they killed him in a spur-of-the-moment incident that happened, a weird confrontation, and then afterwards they find out that he had been calling his brother a bunch. Then would they murder his brother over speculation that he might have told him? No. If they're going to murder his brother too, they're going to do it because they knew for fact that he had called him and told him. Which means there had to have been some sort of investigation that had been going on in regards to this by somebody above our pay grade, right? So, that being the case, that would mean that the killing of Strand was not only intentional, but premeditated. Remember, allegedly he was shot with a shotgun, but those guys also carried a 45 ACP. No one ever talks about that. It's never mentioned in any of those reports. Only the riot gun or shotgun is mentioned. It took, who was it? Was it Richard Ogg or one of those other guys who mentions the 45? So, And when Schrand is killed, they don't talk about a shotgun blast during the injuries. They discuss a missile. That's how they describe a bullet, or a foreign projectile is always just, would be described as a missile. But a shotgun, a riot gun, didn't shoot slugs, wouldn't have a missile. It would have a collection of pellets, right? So there's major shenanigans there. And if you look at it from the perspective of Schrand was killed premeditatedly, which if you're going to say he's killed, it had to have been premeditated based on the circumstances I just laid out, then they're not going to have Oswald shoot him, right? Oswald couldn't have shot him. They would not put somebody in there to murder this fucking guy who was the subject of his snooping. They're going to have a real killer go in there and kill him, right? It's premeditated. So that means there's more going on than there was a confrontation that night. It's the only logical conclusion you can draw if you're going to draw the conclusion that he was murdered. All right, so what else do I have going on? Well, on the same kind of theme, we've got the statements of Sidney Robinson. Robinson also worked with Oswald at Atsugi. You know, it's funny because all these people say they work with Oswald at Atsugi, but then when you really dig into the details and the security logs and all this stuff, it turns out that they only knew him in passing. I guess everybody wants to be in the middle of the story. But synopsis, Sidney S. Robinson, radar technician, Federal Aviation Agency, Anchorage, Alaska, who's presently attending the FAA Academy, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, advised he was acquainted with Lee Harvey Oswald from 10 or 11/57 to 2 of 58 at Atsugi Naval Air Station, Japan. During above period, Oswald assisted with guard duty under Robinson's supervision, and they shared the same bunkhouse. All right, so I just need to point out real quick that this is so far ringing familiar. And the reason it's ringing familiar to me is because this is basically the same story from Richard Cyr, CYR. He knew Oswald about the same time, 10 or 11/57, February of 58, and he knew him from working with him on guard duty. And I don't believe Cyr was in his bunkhouse, but he knew people who were in the bunkhouse. So it's a very similar story, very similar flavor. Just like the similarities between the stories of Robert McNeil and Pierce Allman, who both met Oswald on the stairs of the book depository, right? Same story from two different people. That's what we're getting here. Same story, two different people. Weird, right? You know, a lot of this to me rings as though it was... about so much of the history of these people was just fabricated after the fact. And that's why some of these facts are just wrong, because it was fabricated and reinserted into the record, and that was it. Robinson stated that he said very little and that he only spoke when spoken to. Robinson admonished Oswald several times while on guard duty for sitting down and reading. Oswald in return made sarcastic remarks or stared as if he resented supervision. Robinson said Oswald did not appear interested in firearms, did not believe Oswald was an expert marksman at that time. About 2 weeks after Oswald arrived at Atsugi, he had heard Oswald shot himself in the wrist with a .22 caliber. Here we are with the wrist story, not the elbow story, and which it was believed to have been reported as an accident. Robinson did not know how Oswald spent off-duty hours. Robinson named persons who probably knew Oswald in Japan but knew of no close acquaintances. He never heard of Oswald refer to communism or Russia, and Oswald never mentioned politics whatsoever. So, my next slide on Robinson says, according to Robinson, Oswald worked guard duty at Atsugi as well as aboard ship while on maneuvers at the Philippines. He does not mention Martin Schrand or Subic Point. Robinson's not named in Martin Schrand's investigation, indicating he was not present at Subic Point on January 5th. So Sidney Robinson obviously did not know Lee Oswald. He knew Harvey Oswald. Because if he knew if he knew our Oswald, he would definitely have been mentioned in the reports on Martin Schrand. Here's a reference to Cyr. Let me read this to you. In October or November 57, while Robinson was assigned to the Marine Air Control Squad No. 1 at Atsugi Naval Air Station near Yamato and Yokohama, Japan, as a radio technician, Lee Harvey Oswald was transferred into this station and assigned as a radar controller at MACS-1. Robinson and Oswald were in different work areas, and Robinson could furnish no information concerning Oswald's duties as a radar controller at MACS-1. The only person he could recall who might possibly have worked with Oswald was one first name unknown, Cyr, C-Y-R, phonetic, a radar controller. Robinson believed Cyr was from the eastern part of the United States, but could furnish no other information concerning him. Robinson stated he was corporal of the guard at Atsugi intermittently during the time he was assigned there, and Oswald assisted with temporary guard duty under Robinson's immediate supervision at Atsugi and aboard the ship while on Philippine maneuvers from October or November until February 1958, when Robinson returned to the United States. Oswald was still at Atsugi when Robinson left in February 58. Okay, this is a problem for me because this is the exact same story of Richard Cyr. Exactly. This is the exact same fucking story of Richard Cyr. Go read Richard Cyr's statements, and they're going to be virtually identical to Robinson's. Because Cyr left in February of 58 also, right? Cyr named the boat Cuyahoga County. But like I already said, Cuyahoga County went to Guam. It literally went to fucking Okinawa for like a day or two, gassed up, and then went to Guam. Okay, so Richard Cyr is full of shit. How full of shit is Sidney S. Robinson? The fact that Robinson and Cyr aren't mentioned in the Strand. Here's another twist. Let me put another twist up here. Because I'm going to figure this out at some point. And anybody thinks I'm not is fucking crazy. They're kidding themselves. I'm going to sort this through. And what a possibility is that the other Oswald, instead of coming back and then heading back to New Orleans to be with Palmer McBride, which I don't think happened anymore. I think it was somebody else working there at the Pfister Dental Lab, not the real Lee Harvey Oswald or even the fake Lee Harvey Oswald. But these guys here, Robinson and Cyr and a couple other names that they mentioned, are not mentioned in anybody else's reports, but I of course found them in various diaries. But what if it was actually Harvey Oswald who showed up at Subic Point in January 1958 with Martin Strand? What if? There would be fireworks. There would be literal fireworks. Heads would roll, right? But that's a possibility because Robinson and Cyr and the way they describe this guy doesn't necessarily sound like our Harvey Oswald. Sounds like it could have been Lee Oswald. But remember, Lee Oswald from October 27th until the November 15th or 16th is in the hospital, right? So who the fuck are these people working with? Again, we could have another situation where we're talking about another Oswald who's not Lee Harvey Oswald. Could it be Clifford, Clyde, or Clayton Oswald? Could it be Robert Oswald Jr.? Because there's a Robert Oswald Jr. who's actually in the mix here as well, who is actually the son of a distant cousin of Oswald's from New Orleans named Robert R. Oswald. So, yeah, the Oswald name game is well, possibly afoot here because some of the information here provided just doesn't jive. And then we start getting statements that are duplicated, just like what I'm seeing in Dealey Plaza, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the edge of the simulation. And the code keeps changing itself because we're getting close to the edge. It's the only thing I can think of. But I think I'm done rambling for today. And sorry we didn't get to Marguerite Oswald. We'll get to her tomorrow, and I'll do my best to wrap up this book. Thanks, everybody. Tomorrow, tune in for a new Bloody History, World War II. And if you haven't bought my book yet, it's on Amazon. Please go get it. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.